someday. All right. So which one of these medications is on formulary? Fluticasone, salmeterol. Mitch knows this one very well. Dihydroergotamine, or DHE. Solifenacin. Diclofenac gel. Levalbuterol. No. All of the above because they are on the shelf in the CDA. No. None of these because I've got a nasty grant from Katie to prove it. Maybe. Definitely true. True. That's none of the above. So these are some of our more problematic non-formulary medications, which is why I chose to put them on this particular slide. So salmeterol fluticasone was taken off of formulary in 2014 and was replaced with Dilera. So we have a formulary interchange for that particular medication. Dihydroergotamine, although there is an order set built in Epic, it is not formulary, which brings me to a point. If you do need something that needs to be an order set that needs to be built, that actually has to go through the formulary approval process first. And the reason for that is because we want to make sure that the P&T committee has a full opportunity to look at something not only for its efficacy in comparison to other things on formulary, but for its safety. So there are a few safety implications with dihydroergotamine that we will be looking at soon. We've got a couple of people who helped me work on this. Thank you, Craig, for doing a background literature search on that too. Solifenacin. What is our formulary alternative for solifenacin? What is solifenacin? It's for urinary incontinence. Okay, so what is our formulary alternative? Somebody says, I want to use solifenacin. You look at them blankly. What do? What is our formulary alternative for solifenacin? So it's for urinary incontinence. The data is actually only in postmenopausal women. Anybody know what the formulary alternative is? Huh? Oxybutynin. What's the data that shows that solifenacin is better than oxybutynin? It does not exist. That's true. Diclofenac gel, we're in the process of probably adding this to formulary because it does have potentially less GI side effects because of its topical administration. Levalbuterol is not on formulary. It should not be used. We've had extensive work done on this one where it actually has no data to show that this medication decreases tachycardia secondary to albuterol. This is one of those amazing jobs by a pharmaceutical company to say that this medication actually is safer than the formulary alternative, which has never been proven to be true and which has been approved. This is something that all of our physicians who prescribe this medication in the hospital have agreed to do as well. They say we can use albuterol, not versus levalbuterol. This is not something we should be using. Okay. Which of these medications is formulary but has a restriction on its use? Liposomal bupivacaine? You must all say yes. Acetylcysteine IV? Yes. Clobazam? Akash? Yes. We added it to formulary with the restriction of new starts to neurology and neurocritical care. Zoledronic acid. What's it restricted to? Hey, and hemonc. But what about if you want to use it for osteoporosis on the inpatient side? No. Factor VII. Yes, who's it restricted to? And? Heme, and? One more. Trauma. All right. We have restrictions for use? You know, I think I heard about this one time. I'm going to say all of them because why else would she mention these? And I have no idea, but if I don't look at Katie, she won't single me out. My favorite. So, yes, they all have restrictions for use. And we all just talked about them. We'll look at that information a little bit on how we have established those and where you can find that information. So, True or false? The formulary only applies to inpatient areas. False. Okay, so why is that? Why would our formulary apply to all patients in all areas of the health system? Because of supply? No, it's because every medication that we administer to a patient, we want to make sure that we've evaluated safety and efficacy. So if we're going to give it, we want to make sure that we're giving it in the safest manner and the most effective manner. That includes any medication we give in the clinic, any medication that we give at Moore's Cancer Center or any of our infusion centers. It does not include medications that are prescribed and taken off site. So if it's something that is prescribed and taken off site by like our discharge pharmacy, it does not include that. What is our budgeted drug cost per patient day? How much do you guys think the whole drug budget for a day for a patient should cost? Less than $180 or $50. Anybody else? False. Does not depend on where you are in the hospital. What else? What else? What do you guys think? Is it all over? Is it La Jolla and Hillcrest are the same? Where do we get this budget? Why does it matter? Okay, so in La Jolla, our drug cost per patient day that we are budgeted for is $224. In Hillcrest, our drug cost per patient day that we are budgeted for is $133. So, how much does one dose of liposomal bupivacaine cost? No, it only actually costs about $320. Percentage-wise, how much is that of our drug cost per patient day? Over 100%. Okay, so the reason that this matters and the reason this comes up, we actually don't come up with these numbers. These are given to us by budgeting offices. So the reason that we are trying to not only provide the most safe medication, but the least inexpensive medication without losing any efficacy is because this is our budget. We comprise a huge amount of the drug or the cost per patient day, you know, in addition to like the room cost. Anybody know what a room costs here? How much does it cost to actually like walk through the door of the trauma bay? Let's say you go to Vegas, you have a great weekend, you drive back, you're probably still a little hungover, maybe a little drunk. Close. Yeah, it's a little bit over 20,000. Yeah. How much is a day in the burn ICU? One-on-one care with CRT. It's actually a little bit more. It's about 15. Trauma bay is the most expensive. How much is just a regular med-surg bed? You've gone to Vegas, you've come back, you actually made it all the way back, but you are so electrolyte depleted, you have to come into the hospital to get fluids. How much does that cost? About $2,500. Okay. So, but here's the kicker, is why are we so focused on our inpatient drug costs when it comes to our formulary? So, how do we bill for a patient who has an inpatient stay? Do we bill for every single dose, every single medication they get? Okay, so we do it by grouping, right? So let's say you do get admitted for IV fluids because you're dehydrated. That is going to be probably MSDRG, electrolyte disturbances. I think it's hypokalemia or hyperkalemia, or whatever your electrolyte disturbance ends up being. So let's say that you do that and you come back and it's your day for your adalimumab. How much does adalimumab cost? A lot. It's like $700. So that we're only going to get reimbursed for the price of the medications that we have to give for that DRG. So what they expect to do for a DRG for somebody who is dehydrated is give you fluids. So it's like one of the cheapest medication DRGs that you can submit for. You then add on top all of these other medications, and let's say you're only here for a day because you're just getting fluids and then you're going to go home and just hide in your ball of shame. You don't need your adalimumab. You can get that when you go home. Okay, so the point is, though, if you come in and you came in specifically because you somehow lost funding and you don't have adalimumab, or something happened and you don't know how to get it, if we're going to give you charity care, which UCSD is more than willing to do, let's give you charity care on the outpatient side in the infusion center where it costs us $250 instead of $750 on the inpatient side, right? So let's use our budget the way that we possibly can, at the best possible way. So let's go to the infusion center, give it there for a quarter of the price. That's why it matters. Okay. When a non-formulary medication is ordered, we have it on our shelves, it's no big deal and we should dispense it. False. How many people have done this? Everybody raise your hand. Everybody raise your hand because you all have done it. I have done it too. Okay. We have done it. This is not actually, this is the way that we end up having diclofenac gel on the shelf when it's been non-formulary for the past 5 years. This is the way that we have solifenacin on the shelf and it's non-formulary. So this is not actually what we should be doing. We should be looking for formulary alternatives, which unfortunately is not something that's really easy to do in CP Online. I'm going to show you how to do that. I will show you this because this was supposed to be a true false. I know exactly where to find formulary alternatives if non-formulary medication is ordered. Do you guys know where to find that information?
True.
I will show you. Okay, so you all round, and I want to make sure that you're able to, excuse my expression, but I want to make sure you all can spot bullshit when you hear it, right? Because there's a lot of it. So the FDA wouldn't have approved this drug if it wasn't a good drug. That is not true. Okay, so many medications were approved. If anybody was at P&T yesterday, you heard this whole long explanation from Dr. Morris about acetylcysteine and why it wouldn't have been approved for inhaled use if the FDA was the current FDA. So some things are approved that would never get approved today, like theophylline would never have gotten approved today if it had been gone through the FDA today. Patients should not be denied access to any drug approved by the FDA. So if a physician says, I want to give it, the nurse says, I'll give it, and you say, it's my job to do what? I'm the pharmacist. Your job is to find the most safe and efficacious medication for a particular indication. But you still have to have that difficult conversation with the physicians if they still want to give it. So the point is that sometimes just because it's new and shiny doesn't mean it's better. Weighing risk and benefits. This is a beautifully designed drug that neatly counteracts the pathophysiological mechanisms in this disease. I've heard a rep or two say this. So it kind of, one of the things, and I'm not trying to play politics here, but if you listen to our president talk sometimes, he actually never really says anything of substance. Like there's no substance to the words that he says. And this is kind of the same thing. If you really listen to a drug rep sometimes, if they have no substance to what they're saying, then you can pretty much bet that there actually isn't good evidence for their drug. It's kind of like when you read a clinical trial and they never talk about what the outcome of their primary result is. You know why? Because they didn't find anything in their primary results. Their primary outcome. Same thing. If it doesn't say anything, it's like, do you guys watch Next Food Network Star? I love Next Food Network Star. Like the word that you can never say is delicious, right? Like how do you describe food? It's like how I describe beer, right? It's got a great mouthfeel. It's got a really nice citrus aroma and it's piney. It's nice. I don't say that beer is good and I'm going to get drunk. Like that might happen, but that actually doesn't describe the beer in any way. We want to describe what actually happens with these medications. We are an academic medical center, and by not having access to the newest drugs, our residents are not learning state-of-the-art medication. What are they learning? Real world. They're learning how to be good practitioners. They're learning how to provide the most evidence-based care for their patients. That's what we are teaching them. We're not teaching them how to use a new medication, but we should teach them how to appropriately analyze the trial and the PK data for that medication so they know how to judge it the next time they have to use it on one of their patients. While we probably have to accept drug restrictions due to cost, it's a trade-off in quality every time we do so. I strive in my job to never make this statement true. So, although my title is pharmacoeconomic specialist, every single time that we look at something, if it's expensive and it's significantly better than the current formulary alternatives, we're going to use it. Okay? But if it's not, we have to have a real-life conversation about what's going to happen for these patients. And any unknown risks far outweighed by the benefits of this new drug. So, one question is, do you guys know, has every medication gone through phase 3 trials now when they're approved by the FDA? Do you have to have phase 3 trials to be approved for use in patients by the FDA? You don't. So that's one of the things about how they're pushing a lot of these new oncology medications. They're getting approved by phase 2 trials. So what does that mean as far as safety for our patients and real life patients? It means we don't really know, right? So we're relying on post-marketing data for a lot of these patients. So we don't know what the risks are really in large patient populations. We're still finding those out in some patients. So by the end of the day today, we're going to discuss how medications are added to the formulary and the process that we go through, what to do when a non-formulary medication is requested, how we're going to leverage our drug information resources to give the information, the best information that we possibly have. How do you triage a medication that's considered outpatient only if we want to use it on the inpatient side? I'd like you guys to give me feedback on what you would like for consistent feedback on formulary medications, and most importantly is to eat cookies. You're not allowed to say eat like Cookie Monster in my house because Briggs will literally take all of his food and like smash it on his mouth and like let it fall out. And yeah. So we've kind of talked about all this. I'm going to go past this, but the residents have seen some of this, but I'm hoping this is actually a little bit more real life information. So a formulary basically is a readily accessible list of medications. A formulary used to be literally a paper list that was kept in the CDA of medications that were on formulary. And that's why, you know, it's a little bit outdated of a term. But basically, as I've said before, this also applies to all of our drugs that are administered at UC San Diego. This includes radiology. So all of our contrast agents technically are supposed to be reviewed by pharmacists before we give them to our patients. We're not going to do that, but it is actually supposed to be done. So there are pros and cons to a formulary. So medications, the VA and Kaiser use formularies different than we do, right? They use it to decrease costs for the inpatient and outpatient side, and they can designate how a patient gets something on the inpatient side, and then it crosses over to the outpatient side because they are, you know, accountable care organization for all intents and purposes. What happens on the inpatient side translates more easily to the outpatient side for them. For us, that's not entirely true. So most controller medications that we have are going to be on the formulary here. So all of our antihypertensives, most of the medications that we use for like CKD or something like that, things that we don't want patients to go off of, we'll probably have them on the formulary. The exception is with an asterisk of medications for diabetes, right? Because we don't typically continue oral medications for diabetes on the inpatient side because of disruptions in nutrition or procedures, et cetera. It also helps us to more adequately control the medications that are available to our nurses in our Pyxis units. So if we know what's on our formulary, we can actually stock those things. So if you've seen what's one of the things that we always get dinged for in our nursing survey? Like the medications at bedside when they need it right away, they want it right away. We do that by putting things in our Pyxis, right? And by having a formulary, it helps us figure out what we can put in our Pyxis. It hopefully can improve cost savings, and probably most importantly, it is required by the Joint Commission to have a formulary and a formulary management system and to audit that formulary. So the con is that it's not necessarily well proven that this saves money. So we don't really know that it saves money. I can't tell you that it saves money for us for sure. It can interrupt normal workflow. So if anybody who has ever dealt with a patient's own medication knows that it is a huge disruption in your workflow. And it can lead to patient dissatisfaction, and that is not fun to deal with, for sure. So in our formulary policy, there are a few definitions, which is formulary, restricted, non-formulary, and outpatient-only medications, more or less. So newly marketed medications, the most common thing that I get is newly marketed medications are always non-formulary until they're reviewed by the PMT committee. And so we, if at all possible, are trying to supply medications for patients for a couple of reasons. How many people keep like a pill bottle in their bag somewhere? Yeah. Like ibuprofen? Doesn't anybody keep ibuprofen? Okay, do you have Tylenol in there too? Yeah. Okay. So all you pharmacy students, what is an adulterated versus a misbranded medication? You guys remember these terms? What's an adulterated versus misbranded medication? You guys are probably closest to this and you should study this for your boards. Yeah, who just took their boards?
One of them is one of them is the labeling is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, the adulterated is it's either expired or I don't know if expired is included there, but the formula.
You've driven to Arizona and you left your meds in your car and now they've gotten really, really hot. Or you've left it above your sink and they've gotten a little bit damp and maybe the coating doesn't work well. Or you've put the ibuprofen and the Tylenol in the same bottle and maybe they have a little bit of ibuprofen and a little bit of Tylenol in it. Yeah. So one of the things we want to do is we want to provide medications for patients because we have zero idea about how they've stored these medications when they're not here. You know, like I'm a pharmacist. I'm terrible at storing my medications. I'm terrible at taking my medications when I'm supposed to. And I feel like I know more about compliance and medications than 99% of the population, excluding the people in this room. But when we have somebody comes in here, we want to make sure that we give them a medication that we know the chain of custody on that medication. Okay, we know that it's been kept at the proper conditions. We know that it has been sold to us by the drug manufacturer and not off the gray market. We know all of these things. So that's why we want to provide patients our medications instead of theirs, even if it makes them very unhappy. And that's how I typically explain it to patients. It works about 50% of the time. So our formulary process is basically outlined here. The most important part for you, the pharmacist, not the residents, because that's this part, but is that the clinician submits the formulary addition request form. Please, please, please don't do this for them. Please have the prescriber submit the formulary addition request form. Sometimes they just do it on a whim. They're like, yeah, we should add that to formulary. And then you guys take it and you're box checkers. You'll do something. If somebody tells you to do something, you're going to do it. And you'll submit the formulary addition request form. And then you go back to have them sign it and they'll be like, oh, what was that medication again? Oh yeah, okay, good, we should do that. Please have them fill it out because we want to make sure, number one, that they really want it, that they understand how they're going to use it. And on the very back of that form, it also has a conflicts of interest part where they can say, do they participate in drug trials? Are they speaking for the company? Have they received money for the company? It's really important to understand what the conflicts of interest are for our prescribers when they give that because, no matter what somebody says, there is definitely data that shows that any kind of supplement from a company, whether it be just a dinner, can influence prescribing behaviors. So formulary management EPIC, clinicians can't order medication, non-formulary medications, only pharmacists can, except when they are admitting somebody to the hospital where they can then say, continue from outpatient only. So I just had a patient that was admitted who obviously was going out of the country and had done all of this stuff to go out of the country and had got all these medications, which were pretty obviously not maintenance medications. Every single one of them showed up in the queue when they admitted the patient. All travel vaccinations, all everything. Continue. And you call the resident and they're like, oh yeah, I just hit the buttons. It happens a lot, okay? And it's definitely different per service how fastidious they are looking at that stuff. But that's the only place where they can order the non-formulary medications. But they can type in help orders. So the physicians who have been here for longer know they can type in help and then put it in the name to order it. And then your job is to say, yes, we should use this, or no, we shouldn't use this after you figure that out and talk to them. But clinicians can never order therapeutically interchange medications. And so I see very little like PPIs on our non-formulary report. Like we see a few omeprazoles and we see a few pantoprazole POs and stuff, but not that much. So you can see it in the queue when it comes across because there is an indicator that says non-formulary, and you can also tell that there was a comment entered by the physician. When you document a non-formulary order, it's helpful if you actually put the correct thing here. I would say most of the time these things aren't correct. The category is why they want to submit this. But best case scenario, you can actually put in an IVent as to the conversation that you had with the physician as to why this is something you want to continue on the inpatient side. So where do you find, this is kind of an outdated slide and you can tell, but how do you find what our formulary is? Where is our formulary housed? ClinPharm. So we changed it. You can tell it's an old slide because there's still micromedics here. That we used to have reference links for micromedics in EPIC, and we changed it to ClinPharm so that it was a one-stop shop within our health record, so that you didn't have to go to 3 different systems, which we used to have. You used to have to go to Amplify, and then you'd have to go to ClinPharm, then you have to go to Micromedics. And I kind of want to just make it a one-stop shop so you didn't have to click on a lot of different things. You can also find it on our Epic homepage. And Form Checker is in CP Online. Form Checker is a company that contracts with clinical pharmacology. It's really important that you know that because they don't interface all that well, to be quite honest, but it is in there. When a medication is approved for the P&T, by P&T, it's approved per the CMS approved compendia. So we have 4 CMS approved compendia. It's NCCN, DrugDex, Clinical Pharmacology, and AFHS. So what that means is if it's approved by the P&T committee, it's approved for any of those CMS approved compendia. If it's an off-label use and it's not in any of those CMS approved compendia, it's not technically approved by the P&T committee. We don't really ever enforce that, but that's technically the way that it is approved. So finding the formulary status of a medication, you can do a couple of ways. You can go through your typical clinical pharmacology status, or you can go over here to Form Checker, which is over here on the bottom right. And this is where I said that these two companies aren't actually the same company because they don't interface that well. It's kind of hidden to find the information over here. But when you see something that is formulary, it will show up in green. Anything that is formulary will be noted as formulary. Okay, it's green. Green means go, right? Okay. If it is formulary with restrictions like acetylcysteine, then it will say how it is actually restricted. This is actually an interesting one because the different formulations are restricted. Why did we restrict one formulation of acetylcysteine? What do you think? It's very expensive. Yeah, actually really expensive. So IV acetylcysteine, the daily cost of IV acetylcysteine, I think is like $2,200 a day or something like that. You guys know you can switch over, you can ask them to switch over to PO. What's the difference between IV and PO acetylcysteine? If somebody can take orals, yeah, it does taste like crap, but if somebody can take orals and they have Tylenol toxicity, they're equal. They're totally equal. Switch it over to PO if you can.
So are we doing this for all these meds that keep coming up expensive now? That they're changing the cost? Are we going to try to
restrict them?
Some sort of
Not for all of them, no. I mean, we're not going to try and restrict, EpiPens, and we're not going to try and restrict vasopressin in a way that would inhibit a patient getting it in like a code situation, but we are trying to optimize the way that it's used, yes. You can also go through the Resource Center and find all of that information in Form Checker. This is actually the system that I update the formulary in. What's important is when you go through Form Checker, and you'll have to do this to find formula alternatives, there's 2 radio buttons here, which for some reason are showing up really blurry, but it says view all drugs because it defaults to view formulary drugs only. So if you type in something that's non-formulary, you'll get nothing. It's a little frustrating. It's something that I've asked them to update, and we will see if they do. So our first knowledge application here, this is saxagliptin. Based on what you see here, is saxagliptin formulary, not formulary, formulary with restrictions? Not formulary. The key is you don't see anything in green here. There's nothing in green next to it right here that says whether it's formulary or not formulary. So it is not formulary. So this patient's on saxagliptin, and you don't know if we have a formulary DPP inhibitor around, right? So how do you find that information out? You can go to Form Checker. So you can click here, which is just that little link right underneath, or you can go over here to what I've pointed you to before. Like I said, make sure that you view all drugs. And then if you click this little thing over here, again, this is kind of tedious, but you click this cross view, and it'll take you, and you can click right here, and it'll show you what all of the DPP inhibitors are. And you will see that sitagliptin, which is down here on the bottom, is actually one of our formulary medications. That's how you see what's on formulary. If it's all in the same drug class, that's how you see what it is. When we had Amplify before, it was all just on the right panel. It was really nice. I'm trying to get them to add this to our new panel and our new look on the clinical pharmacology powered by Clinical Key. But we'll see. We'll see if they get that to me. Yes, ma'am.
Kind of like how you mentioned where if it's not on formulary, it just isn't there unless you click that button. It's always a little scary when you don't see it because then you're like, well, did the interface work or is it really not on formulary? Is there a way to request that they actually have it say not formulary, just like it says on formulary?
I have requested. Actually, they didn't have a not on formulary radio button until I made them put it on there. And so that was a big win a couple years ago. I'm trying to get them to do it, that what you're asking for. The problem is the way that medications are populated in clinical pharmacology is by NDC. So they would have to say that for every single NDC that is in clinical pharmacology, which isn't a problem for some, but if you're like hydrochlorothiazide, you basically would have a list of red that is however long, you know. So that's one of the problems, and that's why they struggle with it. Yeah. Most of the stuff in clinical pharmacology is correct. If you ever question it, just go ahead and send me a text. But most of it's correct.
I usually don't. You know, it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah. Well, you can also go into EPIC. So the formularies in EPIC and the formulary in clinical pharmacology don't speak to each other. They are not the same. Okay, so that is, they come from totally different databases. So we have to constantly work to keep them blind, more or less. It would show up as non-formulary, yes. But I mean, it's harder for us because we see everything, right? Like we can type in everything. It'll show up as non-formulary, yes, because you'll see that formulary exception at the bottom. But it's going to be harder for you to tell, whereas a physician couldn't order it at all. You're going to be able to see it all.
so it definitely thinks in our database it's not formulary.
In EPIC?
The database,
Yeah.
What about the facilities list is
The facilities list
be
should all be formulary.
everything in the facilities list is formulary.
Should be. That's not entirely true. I know there are a few exceptions, but it should be that way, yes. And there are different med lists. You know, EPIC can make different med lists. Like Moore's Cancer Center has a different med list than Hillcrest and La Jolla. They have different med lists. So like for example, you know, Kat probably knows this better than anybody, but when you go and you have to create a treatment plan for an oncology medication that we don't typically give on the inpatient side, you can actually pull that treatment plan over from Moore's Cancer Center through their different medication list, you know, and their different build. So we have different views for all of our sites. Hillcrest, like if I have to look at all of our oncology medications, most of them aren't in the med list in the Hillcrest central medication list. Yeah.
So just to make sure I get this, so like if the physician wanted to order Zopinex, they have to call us if the patient wasn't on it as an outpatient. They wouldn't be able to see it.
So Juan's question was, if a physician wanted Zopinex, they would have to call us if the patient wasn't on an outpatient. So they want to start it on the inpatient side. They want to start Zopinex new. Yes, they have to call us for it. Yes. So one thing I will say is that the buyers do feel pressured by the pharmacists to buy things. The buyers are supposed to go by what is on formulary, but just like us, they don't really like saying no, and they don't really like being in confrontations. And so if you ask a buyer to buy something that is not formulary, you're kind of putting them in an awkward position as well. You know, they know what they're supposed to buy and what they're not supposed to buy. But if you're like, this patient really needs it, they're going to be like, I don't know. Okay, I'll buy it, you know? So my request, and this is a request that the buyers asked me to bring up, is that, you know, you don't put them in that compromising situation. If it's something that you think the patient really needs, you can talk to me about it, and we can ask the buyers, or, you know, just use your judgment, but try not to put them in an awkward situation, if at all possible. Therapeutic interchanges are also almost all in EPIC. They're also in the prescribing authority, which you all should know because you do operate under that prescribing authority, but they should all be in EPIC, and they are all in CP Online. It's not the most elegant way to enter it in CP Online, but they should all be there. So the most typical one that you see is Nexium or whatever, maybe to Protonix IV or Lansoprazole PO. The physicians actually can't see the continue with original order, only we can. Yeah, that's what. So they can't see that part. That's just us. So we do have a lot of abilities that they don't have. So that's something you should kind of be aware of. Okay, so what do you do if you don't agree with the prescriber? So really the appropriate thing to do is, like, if they say, I really need this, and let's just say you decide to have that difficult conversation, you're like, I don't think so. I really don't think this is the right thing to do. You do have the authority to push back and say, I'm not going to verify. You can ask somebody else if they want to verify. But if you guys are all on the same page, then it goes either up to your direct supervisor or me, You can always call me. I've had plenty of these conversations with prescribers about why, and I'm willing to be the bad guy, willing to be the fall guy as to why we don't have it or why there should be a different medication that is used. Please use that. If it then has to be elevated, it'll be elevated to the director of pharmacy and then potentially either to the chair of P&T, who is Rick Clark for the main P&T, or Dr. Greg Daniels, who is the P&T chair for the oncology P&T. The only exception to this is our GI medications. So natalizumab, adalimumab, certolizumab, and infliximab. We have a lot of very knowledgeable physicians in that group who are extremely well published and have been primary author on most of these papers. And therefore, they wanted to be on the record for approving their own inpatient medications that are supposed to be outpatient use only. And they've actually proven to be very good at that. So we let them have that authority. They haven't abused it to this point. And so they are the only service that gets to approve their outpatient only medications to date. So as I said before, make sure that you ask the physician to fill out this form. But the question is, where do you find this form? What? Yes, it is there. Anybody else? Forms.ucsd.edu. You're talking like an administrator. Yes.
Have you seen it go when it's gone to Rick Clark? It's shot down.
Kind of.
Very little experience has been that level.
So the question is Rick an automatic yes?
Kind of. Once there's that attending to attending kind of conversation, you ever see them shooting down?
So the answer is no. The secondary answer is that if you call me first and I tell Rick the opinion, he'll generally let me have the conversation, and I have been mildly able to push people to different directions. Not always. But, if generally what happens is you call him, he's out playing with his kids or something like that. He's asking like 3 or 4 good questions. And then it's like, well, if they make a persuasive enough case, then no. But Dr. Daniels for the Morris Cancer Center P&T has said no a couple of times on things, and the patients have expired shortly thereafter or something. And I think there is a reason for this, and it has worked. I haven't seen that many no's, but it is the process. What we don't know is how many people have not called because they don't want to, because they know that they're not going to get a yes. We don't know what that number is. And I do think that the process of calling Rick and asking for it or emailing them has dissuaded some of the ones that are a little bit more fluffy.
So you were saying, like, if you disagree, then they go up this chain of command.
Yes.
But if you are persuaded by the physician who's asking for non-formulary medicine, then you just document in an IVEN saying, these are the reasons why they would like to use the medication. I'm okay with using the medication.
Yeah, so the question is, what if you agree with the physician and you think the non-formulary use is appropriate? What do? That's your discretion. I don't think we need to get down to the level of every non-formulary medication needs to go through a specific committee. There are hospitals that do that. There are hospitals that have their pharmacists call somebody like me every single time a non-formulary medication wants to get used. I think you guys have sound clinical judgment, so I don't think it's necessary. And we only have about 2 to 4% non-formulary use per admission per month anyways. So I think we're doing a pretty good job. Not great, but good, like really good.
But just you would like the IVEN though, right?
I would love the IVEN because when I go back and look at it, it's much, much easier to figure out why we use something, because sometimes some oddball ones come up that I have no idea why something was used. It doesn't make sense, but every once in a while. So forms.ucsd.edu. It's also in Form Checker. So if you go into Form Checker, you'll find it in there. It's also on Pulse, so on our med resources. I don't know if you guys know, but on the left-hand side, there's actually these additional things over here. REMS information, additional med resources. That's where our contrast formulary is, if anybody ever asks you. And that's where another D1263 is, as well as it's also on iShare. It's all the same form. It's loaded in a lot of different places, so you can find it. We kind of talked about this, what P&T approved indications are. And what if a patient wants to use their own medication? So I'm in the process of evaluating our use since we put in place the new process. I honestly, I don't have the data yet. I don't think it's made that much of a difference. We still have about 2 to 3% patient's own medication use, but I do think it is prompting some of our physicians to think a little bit more about the supplements that we use in some of our patients, and if those supplements are actually needed for a lot of our patients. So I do think it is decreasing our supplements, but not their own FDA approved medication. I don't think it's made a difference in that at all, but I think it has decreased our supplement use. Okay, outpatient only. So you're that patient, the person who came back from Vegas, you had a good weekend, you don't have your adalimumab, and you need it. This is one of those medications. So it is a medication that is high cost, typically only used for a chronic condition. It's not something that has to be given typically on a day basis. It's not something that has to be given within like 24 hours for its therapeutic dose to work. That's typically what the medications are on this outpatient only list. So it's the pharmacist's responsibility to contact the prescriber to tell them that they have to how to do this. It's not your job to do this. So if you get requested to have infliximab on the in the MICU, Frank, what do you do when you have somebody request infliximab on the MICU? Ask for the indication first. Whether it can be delayed till the patient gets discharged, and then what? What if they say they still want it? Do you call Rick Clark or do they call Rick Clark? They call Rick Clark. Please have the prescriber call Rick Clark and don't do it for yourself. So this is our outpatient only process. This link is in every single medication that is outpatient only in CP Online. Just click on this link, you'll get to this. This is on the very last page. But basically, if it's a continuation of an outpatient medication, you should contact, the pharmacist should contact the MD and tell them the restriction, and then they talk to Rick Clark or Angela Socia or Greg Daniels if it is an oncology medication. If the patient supply is available, we try and use that. If it's not, we then will have to purchase it. So if that's somebody who can't be discharged in a timely manner, or if it's something that is preventing their discharge, we also will give it. If it's a brand new start, it's my personal opinion on this. I don't think it's a good idea to start a new controller medication if we don't know if the patient's going to be able to afford it or get it on the outpatient side. Okay, that is, sometimes I think it's best to start these non-formulary outpatient-only medications, but if they can't purchase it and they can't afford it, so it's not only that it's covered on their insurance, but they can actually afford it. If they have a $300 copay or co-insurance, you got to ask them if they're going to pay $300 a month to have that medication. That's a lot, right, for most patients. So unless it's a copay that it's covered and the copay is affordable, I think that's the first step here every single time. So Emily called me yesterday about a febuxostat. It was a brand new start on a patient. First things first is their insurance going to cover it? Because have they tried all of the other medications before they've gotten to febuxostat? So
what happened when they get
So they're gonna do a PA.
So did you get your physician to sign off on the form to add it to our formulary?
Emily's a sieve. No, we all are. I would have started it too. We're going to be adding that one to formulary probably.
So we don't need to get anybody else to sign off on the form?
No,
Sonny's working on it too.
we need somebody to sign off on it. Nobody has yet.
Do you want to get your physician?
Oh, I didn't talk to the doctor first, but the residents on the team.
Yeah. So our top non-formulary medications right now, anybody know what they are? You probably guess what a couple of them are. Febuxostat, diclofenac gel. Diclofenac gel is generally number one. What are the other ones? Xopenex actually is not. We just have seen an uptick on it. We had none for like 3 years, and then we started to have a little bit. What else? Coenzyme Q10.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So people are on an outpatient.
There's not good data about its use in some cardiac indications that people have read in Health magazine, and then they end up starting it and you can't convince them to get off of it generally. What else? What else do you think we use a lot?
Levaquin?
Levaquin is, actually that's an interesting one. Is Levaquin formulary?
for
It's only for our BMT patients. Cyclosporin Restasis. It's actually non-formulary. You'd never know it, but it is non-formulary. Yeah. It comes in those nice little like preservative-free packs. It's really easy to dispense. That's our other top non-formulary medication. So that's all that I have for you guys. Are there any other? That's my dog Fozzie. He likes to eat things that he shouldn't. He tried to eat that too. Generally, I say don't bite off more than you can chew when I show this picture. What questions do you guys have? Yes, ma'am.
Issues with maybe conflict of interest with our PNT heads wanting to use non-formulary medication?
The question is there any
That's an example or a
conflicts of interest with our PMT heads wanting to use non-formulary medications? Yes, there is. The latest one that came up recently was isobuconazole. And so our I think it was Lung wanted to use it. So Dr. Young, Gordon Young, is been on the PNT committee forever, and he likes to use isobuconazole in some of these patients. So, but it's not a conflict of interest. He hasn't received any money.
not conflict, but they're caring for a patient that they want to use.
Yes, that does happen. And they end up giving approval for it. They haven't done that. No, I think Rick is Rick has a lot of opinions about stuff, but he's very persuadable about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And Dr. Daniels also, we just reviewed a medication, avelumab, I think is what it was, for Merkel cell carcinoma. And he actually didn't really think the data was that great, and she didn't really want to have it on formulary, but he wanted it reviewed by the PNT committee so we could go on record for that. We don't have enough sway like Memorial Sloan Kettering to say if we don't add it to formulary, it's going to change the price of the drug, which they do. But we can, make our position known so that when a rep comes in, we can say, no, we reviewed it and we did not add it to formulary because we didn't think it was something that we wanted to add. So we can do that because the reps will just keep pushing and pushing and pushing. Question, can reps be in the units? No. If you see a rep, make sure they have their badge on, but reps are not supposed to be in the unit. They're not supposed to be in patient care areas, except for there's a couple of reps, if they're doing like a demonstration on a pump or something like that, they get special approval to come into the units. But if they're there, that's inappropriate, and they're seeking to find someone just to talk to. We just don't need them in our patient care areas. It's actually unsafe for them too, but they should not be in our patient care areas.
Do you ever look at medications that can be lumped together with other meds to get a cheaper cost? Like if Cispro, Levaquin, and Moxie, we always never had Levaquin, but if we were able to rearrange another deal with other meds to get it cheaper, do we ever evaluate that? So
the question is can we pit one drug against another? For cost?
Or are you trying to buy they
buy Protonics and we buy
they make Levaquin and we're also buying this other drug that they make. We just said, we're gonna buy all these meds from you.
That's a Danielle question. The whole pharmacy purchasing is like this black hole of it's so complicated. Whether we have to get a discount because of market share, or we get a discount because we reached a certain threshold, or we don't get a discount at all. We get it through the UC contract. It's so varied. But my question for you, and I need this from you guys, is what type of feedback would you like about formulary versus non-formulary use? Because I review it, but I don't really give a lot of feedback.
I guess maybe an easier place to find why that's not
I was
approved.
going to ask if there's a place where the monographs are